The desert had a way of swallowing sound, swallowing hope, swallowing men whole, and Caleb Moore knew that better than anyone as he stood alone outside his small, wooden cabin at the edge of the frontier, staring at an empty hitching post where his horse should have been. Dust drifted across the moonlit ground like restless spirits, and the wind carried the distant cry of a coyote, a sound that always reminded him how thin the line was between survival and death out here. That horse Shadow wasn't just an animal, it was his lifeline, his brother in solitude, the only soul that had carried him across burning plains, through gunfire and away from graves he never wanted to dig again. Caleb had found Shadow years ago half dead near a dry riverbed, nursed him back to strength, and from that day on, the two were inseparable. Losing him now felt like losing a part of himself. He searched through the dark, calling Shadow's name until his throat burned, following hoofprints that led toward the open desert before vanishing into rocky ground as if the earth itself had decided to erase them. Every story he'd ever heard about the Apache came rushing back. Stories told by drunk men in saloons. Stories twisted by fear and ignorance. Stories of ghosts on horseback, warriors who moved like wind, and women who rode as fiercely as any man. Caleb didn't believe most of them, but as the night stretched on and his lantern flickered low, doubt crept in like a cold knife. He slept little that night, sitting by the door with a rifle across his knees, staring at the darkness, wondering if Shadow had been stolen, killed, or simply chosen freedom over loyalty. Memories haunted him, his father dying on a cattle drive, his mother fading away in a dusty town that never cared, the war he'd fought and survived only to come home to nothing. Shadow had been the one constant, the proof that trust could still exist in a broken world. When dawn finally arrived, the sky burned orange and gold, but it brought no comfort, only a deeper ache in his chest. He stepped outside expecting another day of emptiness, another day of survival without companionship, but instead he froze. There, emerging slowly from the morning haze, was Shadow, walking calmly toward the cabin, reins hanging loose, eyes steady. Relief surged through Caleb like fire until he saw her. Sitting tall on Shadow's back was an Apache woman, proud and unafraid, her dark hair braided and decorated with feathers that moved gently in the breeze, her leather clothing worn but beautifully crafted, her posture carrying the quiet strength of someone who had known hardship and survived it. She looked straight ahead, not at Caleb, not at the cabin, but at the horizon, as if the land itself answered to her. Caleb's hand moved instinctively toward his rifle, then stopped. Something in her presence, something ancient and calm, told him this was not a moment for fear. Shadow halted just a few steps away, snorted softly, and the woman finally turned her gaze to Caleb, eyes sharp but not hostile, eyes that seemed to measure a man's soul rather than his weapon. In that instant, Caleb understood that the night Shadow disappeared had not been an accident, and whatever stood before him now was the beginning of a story far bigger than his own lonely life. And as this chapter closes, remember, stories like these remind us why we gather here, why we listen, why we believe in something more. So if you want to keep riding these unforgettable journeys with us, make sure you subscribe and stay close to the fire. The woman dismounted with smooth, practiced grace, her boots touching the ground as if she belonged to it, and Caleb noticed how Shadow leaned toward her willingly, not like a stolen horse, but like one returning from a chosen path. She spoke first, her voice calm and steady, introducing herself as Ayana, a healer from her people, explaining that she had found Shadow wandering near a canyon, injured by a rattlesnake, and had saved his life the same way Caleb once had, by refusing to abandon what still had a heartbeat. Caleb listened, the tension slowly draining from his shoulders as he realized Shadow hadn't been taken by force but guided by fate. Ayana explained that the horse had led her to Caleb's land, stopping again and again, refusing to move until she followed, as if he knew this place mattered. Over the days that followed, an unspoken understanding formed between them. Ayana stayed to help Shadow fully recover, using herbs and knowledge passed down through generations, and Caleb found himself watching her in quiet awe, not as a legend, not as a threat, but as a woman carrying the weight of her people's survival on her back. They spoke of loss, of land taken and promises broken, of loneliness that stretched wider than the desert itself. Caleb admitted his fear, that the world had no place left for men like him, that every trail led to another ending. Ayana listened without judgment and told him a truth he had never heard before, that the land remembers those who respect it, and destiny does not belong to those who run from pain, but to those who learn to walk beside it. When soldiers passed nearby days later searching for Apache tracks, Ayana prepared to leave, knowing her presence put Caleb in danger. But Shadow refused to let her go alone, circling restlessly. And Caleb made a choice that would define the rest of his life. He saddled Shadow himself and offered to guide her safely through the mountain passes he knew better than anyone. Together they rode across valleys and ridges, chased by ghosts of violence and old hatred, yet protected by something stronger, trust. When they finally reached her people, Ayana thanked Caleb not with words, but by placing a feather in his hand, a symbol of honor, and telling him that he was no longer alone in the world, whether he believed it or not. Caleb returned to his cabin changed, no longer a man waiting for the past to swallow him, but someone who understood that even loss can lead to purpose. Shadow stood taller, stronger, as if carrying more than flesh and bone, carrying a bridge between worlds. And if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that hope sometimes rides back when we least expect it, then don't walk this trail alone. Subscribe to the channel, stay with us, and let these stories keep finding their way home to you.